that, stay mad, chip on my shoulder cause they treat me like an outcast. I ain't gonna take that, stay back, I'll be swinging hard till the hits come in all caps. I ain't gonna lay back, pray that someone's gonna help me, ain't nobody like that.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy DC Derek back with another episode of the Burgandy Boss Podcast. Here we are. We've reached draft time. We've made it through the off season. We've done coaching changes. We've had scouting reports. We've had pro comps and pro projections, and we've broke down these injuries and gotten through everything. And now we've here. It's all built up to this. We're at the day that it all comes to. It's day one of the draft, round one, Thursday night at 7 o'clock. We're here. You know, what will Washington do? There's a lot of different directions Washington could go. But first, I want to talk about some NFL news that we've got going on. The Giants have decided to pick up the fifth-year option of defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence and not that fifth-year option of Daniel Jones, quarterback. That's an interesting move. I guess they're basically, telling him, hey, prove to us you need a long-term deal. You know, we're not going to play this 2-year game that everybody else seems to be playing. We want you to prove it to us now, and if you can't prove it to us now, well, we've got ammunition to go into next year's draft and get one of these big-time quarterbacks, C.J. Stroud, or one of the big guys, Bryce Young, one of the big-name quarterbacks that'll be coming out. So that was interesting. I definitely thought that they would give Daniel Jones the fifth-year option and just re-sign Dexter Lawrence, but to each their own. It's the Giants, too. They do Giants-type things. Now, this is new general manager, Joe Schoen, new head coach. The guy from Buffalo. Forget his name. I can't think of it right now, but it'll come to me, and then I'll just shout it out randomly at y'all. So let's talk about this draft we got coming up, right? So Martin Mayhew comes out, and during his pre-draft press conference, he comes out and says, hey, I don't think that we're going to end this draft with the same number of draft picks that we're coming into this with, which tells all of us fans, hey, they're probably going to be trading back at some point. So I got to thinking, I was like, all right, teams like to trade back. Teams like to get value for their picks, especially if they think they can get a guy later that they've gotten, that they have on their board high. But I was like, man, where could it be, though? So there's a couple spots where we could be trading up or trading back. The first spot I think about is 11. You're there at 11. There's been a lot of rumors and talk that these teams between 10 and 20 all want to trade back, and that the value is not in that top half of the first round. The value is really between 30 and 100. That's where all the talent in this draft is loaded. It's not, there's not a lot of, generational superstars in this draft this year. It's more about getting value, and there's a lot of very good players that'll be there from 30 to 100. And, for Washington, for instance, like we're picking at 11, there's a number of guys who could slip to us that were supposed to go earlier, or, potential to reach for a guy, if we're not able to trade back. So there's a lot of different directions Washington could go. And so Martin Mayhew was talking about acquiring more picks, and it got me thinking, well, we've had all of this Daron Payne drama going on here recently, and I don't know that he is going to ever suit up in a Washington Commander uniform. I think it's extremely likely that here over these next 3 days that he is traded. If he's going to get traded, I think it's going to be over these next 3 days. I know for a fact that they definitely want to recoup that third and fifth round pick that they don't currently have. And that seems like adequate value for Daron Payne, a third and a fifth. Don't ask me who or where or when it'll happen, but it just makes too much sense right now for them to trade back from 11 or trade back from their spot in the second round, because they definitely were not, set in stone with that second-round pick they had. They send it to Indy, and they move back, and they're probably looking at the guys that are there like, well, if we can move back again, we feel comfortable with that. So I would definitely look for them to move back on early day 2 or even tonight, a matter of fact, because like I've said, the value is going to be 30 to 100. So Deron Payne could be moved, and that could get us picks. And I keep hearing this weird, horrible rumor, really. It's a horrible rumor, that Washington could draft Jordan Davis at 11. And let me tell you, first, I hate that idea. That's a horrible idea. I actually was just looking on Twitter, and I seen that we have some memes that have been made. The old man who's holding up the plaid shirt that's the same plaid shirt that he's wearing, and it was like, Washington trading Deron Payne only to draft Jordan Davis, which they're very similar players. They're athletic for their size and known as run stoppers primarily. So I could see that happening. A team like Baltimore fits for Deron Payne to go to, but I wanted to go ahead and say, if that's the plan, if our plan is to trade Deron Payne for a 3rd and 5th and draft Jordan Davis, no. Just keep Deron Payne. We'll be fine, okay? That's not the time to do it. Like, go grab somebody in round 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there, just like when we drafted Tim Settle. Go draft somebody in that range and get somebody of value back there, because Deron Payne is valuable to us as a run stopper, believe it or not. And so replacing a guy exactly how he plays with using the 11 overall pick in this draft, I do not feel is a valuable use of our resources. We've been talking, a lot about Ohio State receivers or Jamison Williams or different guys, that could bolster this offense and add pieces for Carson Wentz on offense, take the weight off of Terry. And I really feel like that's what we need to do this offseason, because I've heard other content creators say this too, so, I'm not the first person you've probably heard say this, but Ron likes to talk about our 4-game winning streak. Well, during that 4-game winning streak, we averaged like 17 points a game. So that's not a great number. You can't hope to hold teams under 17 points per game in the NFL and have a winning record. Like, if you're only putting up 17 points, man, you're struggling on offense. Like, I think the average in the NFL for offensive points per game is like 21 or 22. So, below average offense with a good defense. And, if they think adding more to defense is the solution to that problem, they are greatly mistaken. And I also would not say, don't overlook quarterback in round 2. It is a stretch, however, but it is not, this foregone conclusion that they're just going to not draft a quarterback. And here's why. Ron has said that he wants a 3rd quarterback on the roster. They could be waiting till next year to get a high round pick guy. But with that being said, don't overlook round 2 this year, because it's something that it's almost been a smokescreen where, like, they've gone out of their way to not talking about a quarterback and not doing anything for a quarterback. That it's almost like we went from we need a quarterback super bad. We go get Carson Wentz, and are you trying to sell to all of us that Carson Wentz is going to be the starter here for the next 10 years? Because I don't believe that for a second. Because if he was going to be a long-term starter, you would have restructured his contract, so that he can take half the money this year, half the money next year, and bam, like, that would open money for us to add more playmakers this year, if that's the route that you were going to go. But I fully and completely believe he's probably only going to be on this roster for 1 year, and then he's going to have a 0 dead cap next year, and then we will be able to release him. And that's probably what we will do. And we will go all in on a high first-round pick quarterback next year. And, time will tell if it pans out or not. But with that being said, I've got a few scenarios I wanted us to look at. I seen them just scrolling through Twitter. I seen some different scenarios. I'm like, these are all different scenarios, so I'm going to write them down, and I want you guys to tell me which ones you like the best, because I'm also going to break them down and talk about which scenario I like the best for us. Okay, so we got the first scenario, and all 4 of these have 4 different first-round picks. I'm sorry, there's 5 total. So there's 5 options total. There's 5 different first-round picks, and there's 5 different second-round picks. And I'm going to go ahead and break this to you. One of them is a trade-down scenario, and that one includes the third-round pick. So here we go. Your first scenario that we're going to be looking at is staying at 11, drafting Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame, and then George Pickens from Georgia. I love this, by the way. I love this. I think that's incredible value for George Pickens in round 2. And Kyle Hamilton, as many people have said, he's a chess piece. He's that Buffalo nickel. He can play some dime linebacker for you. He can, play free and strong and wherever you need him to play. He's this big guy, like 6'4", 225 pounds. That is a big guy. So I love that pick. And if he falls to us, which there's a possibility he will, I'm not saying it's a foregone conclusion whatsoever, but I like the prospects of Kyle Hamilton to us at 11 if we decide to stand pat. The next one we're going to look at is possibly my least favorite. And you're going to know immediately why. If you've been following our offseason at all, you will know that I am not a Drake London fan. And that is who this draft had us picking at 11. They wanted us to have Drake London with the first pick and Jaquan Brisker. I will say, I love Jaquan Brisker in round 2. He's also a chess piece. He's a super athlete. He's a big body. He can play free safety or strong safety. And I'm sure he could fit right into that Buffalo nickel role. I mean, if Cam Curl didn't have any problem with it, and Cam Curl's a little lighter than Jaquan Brisker is, then I think he could fit it well. Ron has always talked positional versatility, blah, blah, blah. And he's a guy that could play free and strong. And, he's big enough he can play strong and in the box. He's light enough and fast enough that he could play over the top in a top of a cover 3 or, be one of the 2 deeps in a cover 2. So I like the Jaquan Brisker. I'm just not a fan of Drake London. And this is another one that I've heard a lot of content creators say this. So, it didn't. This is probably not the first time you heard it, but they have a type that they like to go after, and it's these big-bodied guys that are 50-50 contested catch, 6'5", 6'6" monsters. While Ron was in Carolina, of course he had Kevin Benjamin for a while, and then after Kelvin Benjamin, he had Devin Funchess there for a while. And that's exactly what they were. They were these massive 6'5", 6'6", contested catch monsters, red zone threats that could just go up and get the ball off the glass, as they would say in basketball. Get it off the glass and just come down with it, like 10 times out of 10. And that's kind of the same person that Drake London is. I think he's a little more athletic than those two, but I also don't see the comparison to Mike Evans. He's not the athlete that Mike Evans is. He has a different body type than Mike Evans does. So he's somewhere in between Mike Evans and Devin Funchess. I will say that. If you ask me to choose between the Drake London, Jaquan Brisker draft and the Kyle Hamilton, George Pickens draft, give me Kyle Hamilton and George Pickens all day long. On to our next one. And there's going to be a certain section of the fan base that doesn't like this one at all because, spoiler alert, this one includes a round 2 QB. With the 11th overall pick, Washington takes Chris Olave. A lot of you are for Chris Olave in this draft. I'm for Chris Olave in this draft. However, in my personal opinion, I think he would be a guy that we would trade down for. Like, if we trade back, then that's when you're like, okay, we traded to 16 or 17. We now can look at our board again, and if Chris Olave is still there, then okay, let's go after him. He's not a guy that – the only situation I see us going after Chris Olave at 11 is if there's a run on these wide receivers, and I've seen a couple mock drafts like that where you have receivers going, one receiver goes at 4, one goes at 8, one goes at 9, like something crazy like that where you've got a bunch of them that come off. You've got Garrett Wilson that goes off. In this specific one I'm talking about, Drake London was gone. And all the top guys were – Jameson Williams was gone. He went to Atlanta in that one. And so all you're left with basically at that point is Chris Olave, and then your front office starts freaking out because, well, Olave is the only elite top-tier wide receiver left in this draft class because there's a gap between that first tier and the next tier. So we need to go ahead and grab him before we miss out on him. And the second, I talked about it, it was a quarterback. In this specific one, it's Sam Howell. And I know there's a large portion of you that are not Sam Howell fans. I am a Sam Howell fan. I mean, I would say that he's a more athletic Baker Mayfield. Maybe a more mentally put together Baker Mayfield, as some would say. I'm not a huge fan of this draft, but it's a decent draft. It's definitely better than the Drake London, Jaquan Brisker draft. I'll give it that. But still, again, like if you ask me Kyle Hamilton, George Pickens, or Chris Olave, Sam Howell, give me Kyle Hamilton, George Pickens all day long. Just the value there is there. Like, so I'm saying, like, quarterback probably not worth the risk that it would need to be in order for it to pan out. My final one, not including the trade back mock draft, but the final one was Jameson Williams and Jalen Petrie. This is interesting because I heard kind of a crazy pro comp for Jalen Petrie the other day. And I've been doing a lot of research on, and I'm a big Jalen Petrie fan. He plays like lights out all the time. But the pro comparison for this was Jamal Adams, but much smaller. He plays like Jamal Adams, but he's only about 5'10", only about 200 pounds. And Jamal Adams is 6'2", about 220 pounds. And, if you recall 2 years ago, he broke the record for sacks by a DB in a season. So it really showed like his skill set, but then like since then Seattle really hasn't used him like that. So but that's Jalen Petrie though. He plays exactly like that. And Jalen Petrie would be an excellent Buffalo nickel in this defense. Jameson Williams, a lot of people, he's kind of 50-50 with fans. Jameson Williams can be viewed as the best wide receiver in this draft. Or you can look at it and be like, the injuries scare me. He kind of has a build like Devontae Smith where his legs are real skinny. He doesn't have a lot of muscle mass in the legs, and that worries me about future injuries. And to that, I would say you have a valid point. But it's also very similar to how people viewed Jalen Waddle last year, and Jalen Waddle went extremely early. I think he went like 3 to Miami. And if you ask a Miami fan right now how they're feeling about Jalen Waddle, and I'm sure they'll tell you, oh, we're pleased. Very, very pleased with Jalen Waddle. So as long as he's making progress with the injury, I don't see any problem with Jameson Williams as wide receiver, somewhere between 1 and 3. This is the toughest one for me yet. If you ask me, Kyle Hamilton, George Pickens, or Jameson Williams, Jalen Petrie, I think I'd take Jameson Williams and Jalen Petrie just because slot corner is a huge need for us, and I think Jalen Petrie is more of a slot corner, can play free safety, versus Kyle Hamilton, who's kind of a all-around safety who can play in the slot if needed. And for those of you saying, well, we don't have somebody who can cover tight ends, I'll hold you right there because Cam Curl can lock down any tight end in the NFL, and he's shown it. A couple years ago, Landon Collins got hurt, tore his Achilles. Cam Curl stepped in, and he locked down every tight end he saw. So I don't want to hear nothing about that. So take that elsewhere, I say. And that brings me to my last draft that we looked at. It's the trade down draft I told you about. And it's got some value. It's got some future picks. So the deal is, it's a deal with Pittsburgh. Washington trades down to 20, and they pick up Pittsburgh's first this year, which is 20, and they get a second next year, and they get a third this year. And then Pittsburgh gets 11. And I think they swapped 6-round picks or something, but I didn't even include that. I just threw in the third this year. And they had it mocked, and then I threw in that it was the second next year, which we recoup, our second that we trade away probably in the Carson Wentz trade. So at pick 20, they had Washington drafting Daxton Hill, cornerback safety, Michigan. Decent pick. Kind of that same role as Jalen Petrie. I think Daxton Hill's a little bit better. He's more of a clear-cut free safety, prototypical free safety that you would think of when like a Jesse Bates or Justin Simmons, like one of those type of guys. And in the second round, they took John Mechie. I love John Mechie. I'm a huge John Mechie fan. I'm trying to remember who it was, but John Mechie came on to my screen a couple years ago. It was in the national championship. Alabama was playing, and he laid somebody out with a blindside block like crazy. And dude was just pancaked, and I was like, who did that? Sure enough, it was John Mechie. It's like, okay, that's when he came on my radar. I like John Mechie. He does a lot of stuff very good. Another one of these Alabama receivers, though, that is hurt and is going to take some time before he's ready. So moving on with the third pick, and this is going to be very controversial among Washington fans, but this third-round pick got used on Kenneth Walker III. If you talk to a lot of Washington fans, they will tell you, we don't want a running back. We have AG. We have JD. We're set. We have Jarrett Patterson as our number 3. I caution you on one thing. Both of those guys struggle with injury year in and year out. Would it not be beneficial to have an insurance policy and possibly an insurance policy that turns into one of the better backs in the NFL at some point, Kenneth Walker, who broke all kinds of records at Michigan State? He is a little undersized. He is kind of he's a little bit taller than Jarrett Patterson, who's 5'6", 5'7". but he's not thick in the legs quite like Jarrett Patterson is. But the dude has some of the best vision I've ever seen from a running back, and he's just a home run play waiting to happen. And of course, there's a few guys like that in this draft, but I really like Kenneth Walker III. This was a different mock draft because it gave us a third-round pick. And so this is getting that third-round pick without having to trade away Deron Payne, who you could get for, I don't know, maybe an additional third, maybe a third next year, something else. But nonetheless, some people are not going to like this, but I really think Jamison Williams and Jalen Petrie is best case scenario for us. But that's basically it for today. Super excited for the draft tonight. It could go a million different ways. The thing about the draft tonight is there's not clear-cut number ones at every position like you would normally have. Last year we had Trevor Lawrence and then like the rest of the quarterbacks, like that. I mean, for instance, if you look at the tackles in this year's draft, you've got there's no clear-cut number one tackle. It's kind of Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu, and Charles Cross. That's tier one. And then next, after a while, you've got some other guys. And then you hit tier two. So, I mean, it just depends on how you look at it. Like, there's a lot of tiers, and wide receivers are the same way too. You've got that first group that's Drake London, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, and then there's a break. That's tier one, and then later comes tier two. So the only position that I can think of this year that has a clear-cut number one is safety. That's Kyle Hamilton. He's going to go somewhere between 5 and 15 for sure. But then, we're probably not going to see another safety come off the board until round 2. So that's the only position I can think that has a clear-cut number one. But that's really all I have for today's show.